Hello. Let's see, is this behaving? This is
slightly detoured meeting last month. We didn't get anyone assigned to that. I went ahead and did it. And I was late doing so and sent you a link yesterday, a couple links yesterday. The things that I sent out were an article about federal money supporting Native American burn practices in Oregon. And another one was about a round dance in Grand Ronde. I want to talk about, we were talking about having this responsibility rotate, and Hannah was the only one who volunteered, and then Hannah resigned. So, so we need some more volunteers. And I really want to encourage you and ask you all to do this. I have found it really interesting and fun to do. And it's really, I had shared a couple of the sites that she used when she started doing this. And I've been using the same, but in addition, I just Google Native American events or Native American news, and there's just a lot of things. I just find it interesting. I have really gone down a rabbit hole for a while, reading very interesting articles and things, and just picking out a couple to share with you about things that people could participate in or that we may want to learn. So it'd be really helpful if people would sign up and we could just get the months assigned so it's all done. And we don't have to worry about it from month to month. So could we do that? Who would like March? Karen, you want to?
I can do April. 'Cause
April.
I'm not gonna be, I just realized I'm not here.
Okay, so April.
I will do
You want
March.
March. Laura will do March.
And Karen, April?
Yeah.
Any other volunteers at the moment?
There we say May.
May, June?
I already did November.
You did, you did.
But I mean, if I
Thank
need
you.
to again,
We've got
Aaron?
Aaron.
Wonderful.
Can I do May?
May? That'd be
Yep.
great. Wonderful, thank you. We had June. We'd be almost there.
This is Alexi. I'll take June.
Thank you, Alexi.
So the way it works is just send me whatever it is you want me to include and I'll put it in the meeting minute in the agenda. That way people can see it ahead of time because often, it might be just around the corner. And if you wait till minutes come out, it's probably already passed. So
And
Get it to me like a week and a half before the
Say.
meeting.
At least you want to like a week before as well.
At least a week, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you all very much. That's helpful.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did you do the same blessing every time? Different land acknowledgement?
Because we're we're researching and learning about what
Right.
people are doing like now, so ways we can support or something new to learn, so it should be different every time.
Okay, but we still doing a land acknowledgement or a prayer or something?
We
This
haven't
is
done-
instead
Okay,
of.
we've been doing this instead.
Okay. Thank you.
But if you wanted to do that, you could do that. All right, thank you. That's all we need to do on that. So now we're to the public comment section. Do we have people interested in commenting today?
There are no hands raised.
Okay. There we go. So does that mean we have people listening, but?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay. Well, then we'll move on. So then we're getting to our first presentation item. Today we have Logan Tellis. Is that correct pronunciation?
Oh, actually, wait, there is something we have to address in public comment. Sorry. So, because we have private, when someone sends a message to the Sustainability Commission,
yeah.
now's the time when we
Talk about that.
surface that.
Yeah.
So, David Vanderhagen from Northwest Natural sent a letter to the commission. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but basically it was an offer to invite commissioners to come view their space in Sherwood, which is where they train construction crews and basically have a bunch of different setups, mock city block, they can simulate emergencies, they can create real world conditions so the teams can prepare for circumstances as they, might in the field. And then there's also, they're working on blending hydrogen and improving renewable natural gas. They're improving their new renewable natural gas blend in Sherwood. And a bunch of other really cool stuff. So there's a few commissioners who have already expressed interest in going on a tour. I believe it was Counselor Semple, Karen, and Laura. If anyone else wants to join that tour, just let me know. We're sort of working on getting the details sorted out still, but let me know if you want to join.
I'd be interested in finding out when the tour is.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll be able to join time-wise. It's like pretty far away, isn't it? Sure.
Yeah, it's probably like at least a half day, maybe an all day thing.
Okay.
I imagine.
Yeah, I think that I would, be interested to know when it gets scheduled and once that gets pinned down,
Okay.
maybe.
So it sounds like once we
Sure.
get a date nailed down, I'll just share that with the
Right.
commission and can come if they want.
I think that'd be good.
Alexi has his hand.
Alexi has his hand up? Thank you. He does. Alexi.
I do believe I'm out in front of the entry, but it's somebody coming out.
You're kind of muffled. You want to try that again?
Oh, I'm at the atrium, but I'm locked out.
Oh,
We're in the council chambers in
Oh, we're in
LCC.
council. Okay, well, that makes sense then. Okay, I'll be right there.
all right.
It's quite
Alright.
the meeting.
Okay, I did the same thing.
I know, that's why
I was.
Third floor.
Yeah, and I'm still on Zoom here, so
Okay.
apologies.
Yeah, Zoom will travel. Okay, very good, thank you. Okay. All right, now, are we ready?
We're
Logan.
up, Logan. Okay, we're gonna have Ian do this. Yep.
I'll get out of your way just.
Okay.
Gosh. Then Harris should be able to.
Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Logan Tellis. I'm one of the transportation planners with the city of Eugene. I do a few things. One of them is work on implementation of our electric vehicle strategy. So I'm going to talk to you all today about an array of electric vehicle related topics. Danielle provided me with some questions that the commission has had in the past. And so I tried baking answers for those into the presentation, and then we should have time afterwards for additional questions. So let's just dive right in. I'm going to start by talking about adoption rates for EVs in Eugene. I feel very optimistic and positive about where we're at with EV adoption right now. We've seen really significant growth in recent years. As recently as September of 2023, we had 4,655 is the number. So that is definitely a big increase. 4,655 is what ODOT was reporting. So that's EVs that are registered to Eugene addresses. And that represents a really big increase, even from what we were seeing as recently as 2020, which you can see on the chart here. We were even, below 2,000 at that point. So we've definitely seen a lot of growth in recent years. Another really encouraging fact about adoption in Eugene is, every time I go and I download the data from the state, Eugene is always, as far as municipalities go, the second highest in terms of EV registrations. We're always behind Portland. Portland obviously has quite a few more, but we're always there in number 2 with Beaverton close behind. So I think that really speaks to our community's values around sustainability. So I feel pretty positively about that. Now let's jump into talking a bit about some common obstacles and concerns that people express related to EVs. Obviously, there are many concerns people can have. These are just some of the ones I hear the most about. Range anxiety is above and beyond the most prominent one. So people feel concerned that if they drive an electric vehicle, they're not going to be able to reach a charger before they run out of battery. That's something that affects a lot of people's decision-making around this topic. Another big factor for some people is cost. A lot of people, when they're going and they're purchasing an electric vehicle, they're purchasing a new vehicle just because EVs haven't been very prominent in terms of the overall number of them in our community. So there are not as many on the used car market. So that availability on the used car market is something that really makes these unaffordable for some folks from a cost perspective. I think that will get better over time as more people adopt electric vehicles and then they drive them for a few years and then they sell them. We should see more EVs coming onto the used car market. Another thing, talking about market availability, that can mean a few things. The supply chain issues during the pandemic have certainly affected the ability for people to buy electric vehicles, even if they're interested in buying electric vehicles. Aside from that issue, I know there are some manufacturers that still just struggle keeping up with production from like an overwhelming demand perspective. They have so much demand and they only have the ability to produce vehicles so quickly, even if the supply chain issue isn't necessarily an immediate concern. And also market availability, I think, speaks to some folks having a really particular image in mind for what type of car they want to drive, whether that's because of work or a lifestyle reason. Some folks just feel really committed to driving vehicles like pickup trucks or SUVs, maybe even a sports car. And I think in recent years, we've seen more diversity of EVs become available, and that's brought in new consumers. And I think that will only continue to improve over time as more manufacturers get into EVs and more models become available for people to purchase. I got some questions about what incentives are available for EVs. So I want to start by talking about some of the financial incentives at the federal, state, and local level. Some of these are going to be pretty text-heavy slides, so I'm sorry, I know that it's a little small. First, I want to talk about the federal tax credits that are available. So the federal tax credits have a maximum of $7,500. For someone to qualify for the federal tax credit, they need to be under a certain income threshold. So as you can see on this slide, for a married couple, that would be $300,000. If someone's filing as head of household on their taxes, that would be $225,000. And all other filers, that's going to be $150,000. So the income threshold isn't a barrier for most Americans, as you can probably imagine. One thing that has kind of narrowed down on the number of folks who are taking advantage of the federal tax credit is what the US government defines as qualified vehicles for the tax credit. Some changes were made in recent years that really narrowed down the number of vehicles that can qualify for the tax credit. That's largely because there have been requirements introduced for the amount of the components that go into the vehicle that are sourced domestically, and also a requirement for vehicles that undergo final assembly in North America. So that really narrowed down the number and the variety of cars that qualify for the tax credit. There's also MSRP caps for the federal tax credit. So if someone's looking to buy a van or an SUV or a pickup truck, that's going to be $80,000. Anything else, it's going to be $55,000. And like I mentioned, there are requirements for like where the materials in the car are sourced from. If a vehicle meets the critical minerals requirement only or the battery components requirement only, someone can get $3,750 of the credit. If they meet both of the requirements, they can get the full $7,500 for the credit. There are also state rebate programs in a lot of places. The Oregon rebate program is currently suspended, but it is supposed to return this spring. It was suspended sometime in 2023 because the program was facing issues with the amount of funding it had in comparison to the demand. If this program returns as it was before, the maximum would be $7,500 in rebates. The base of that would be $2,500. So you could get that base rebate regardless of your income. And that extra $5,000 is for what the state defines as low and moderate income residents. And like I said, this is a rebate, so you would mail in your application and they would mail you back or just auto deposit the rebate for you. In addition to the rebate for the vehicles, there is a state rebate program for public charging stations. So this isn't going to be able to fund somebody putting a charger in their home, but if somebody is a multifamily housing property owner, if they are a business and want to have workplace charging for their employees, or if they're a commercial destination and they want to have a charger in their parking lot for customers and just the general community to use, they can take advantage of this program to help fund that work. There are also local rebates. All of the local rebates available are through eWeb. So eWeb has rebates for chargers. They do not have rebates for the vehicles themselves. The most common rebate that they're giving out is that $500 rebate for level 2 charging that people are putting in their homes. Now that rebate increases for level 2 charging at commercial destinations, multifamily housing destinations, and it increases even more if that multifamily housing destination is an affordable housing site. There are rebates for DC fast charging. It's not quite as common to see people take advantage of these, but there is a $10,000 rebate for DC fast charging single port and $15,000 for a DC fast charging multi-port project. And when I say port, think plug. So like the number of plugs associated with the project. I also want to point out that eWeb has e-bike rebates, which are great because e-bikes are a really wonderful electric micromobility option for folks. And that's something that we've really seen also take off since the beginning of the pandemic. I got a question about requirements at new development. And so all of the requirements that you're seeing on the screen are reflective of state level regulation. So a combination of state building code changes and the climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking have kind of together produced what you're seeing on the screen. So the requirements are for new multifamily developments with 5 or more units, or if you're building a mixed use development with 5 or more spaces, then you're gonna have to have 40% of the parking spaces equipped with the conduit to support a future charging station project, if anyone ever wants to put in a charger there. For other types of commercial developments, that requirement's gonna be 20%. And like I said, this is really about the conduit connectivity to the parking space. Nobody's required to put in a charging station or operate a charging station. But this is really advantageous because oftentimes the most expensive component of putting in a charger is connecting the electrical to the parking site, because you're digging up concrete, you're digging up asphalt, and you might need to pull it from a building all the way to the space in the parking lot where you want to have the charger. So that is often the most expensive piece, and this is going to make future charging station installations much more affordable down the line if anybody ever wants to put in a charger there.
You say that this is a state requirement now?
So these originated at the state level. In this case, in the case of the top bullet about the 40% requirement for multifamily and mixed use developments, we also have a parking ordinance that was passed by city council that reinforces that climate friendly and equitable communities rulemaking. But the actual 40% came from this down to us from the state. I want to talk a bit about partners that are commonly involved in this work with us. UWeb is definitely our most valuable partner in this work. They, one, really share our values around transportation electrification. In addition to that, something that makes them a great partner is they're really well resourced to do this work. So in the state of Oregon, utilities get clean fuel credits issued to them based on how many electric vehicles are registered in their service territory. So EWEB has the ability to sell these clean fuel credits for revenue, and then reinvest that money into electric mobility related efforts. So this is how EWEB is funding the rebate programs we just talked about. EWEB also uses this funding to do the electric vehicle ride and drive events that happen every summer. So they hire a company to come in, bring a bunch of EVs and have them available for people to test drive. They use this revenue to fund small grants that they issue to other organizations in our area that are related to electric mobility. They do a lot with this funding. So they're a really important partner in this work. I also want to call out Lane County. Lane County owns some chargers themselves at administrative offices throughout Eugene. But in addition to that, one way that we partner in this work is through grant applications. So very recently, a federal grant program has come online, the Community Fueling Infrastructure Grant, and the City of Eugene and Lane County in this past round put in a joint grant application together. Some of the locations included in the grant application were Lane County locations, some were City of Eugene locations, but that process of bundling in our requests together is something that is competitive and attractive when we're going for these large competitive federal grant programs. That's something we've heard from federal staff, is that desire to see partnership between organizations. And also, if they're funding one larger project versus a number of smaller projects, that's also just, they tend to think that's more efficient for their workflow because they're doing less contracting work overall. So Lane County is an important partner on grant applications related to EVs. I also want to call out LTD. They have done a great job securing electric buses for a transit agency of their size. They really have a significant number of electric buses, and we appreciate their work on that. Fourth Mobility is a nonprofit based in Portland that focuses on electric mobility topics. The way that we partner with them, sometimes they'll just give us advice on things, they'll help connect us with other organizations that have done things that we're thinking about doing. But also, Fourth is operating currently a small scale electric car share pilot program that's happening in Eugene. So they're also a partner in that sense. The Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association is another nonprofit It's mostly volunteers who are EV owners and EV enthusiasts in our area. And one of the many ways that they are involved in that space is they volunteer to run some of our education workshops related to electric vehicles. So the Rev Up workshop series is what we call it. And it's really just a workshop that covers all of the frequently asked questions from first-time EV buyers. People go and they have the opportunity to watch the presentation and have some of those questions answered. With that, I'm going to jump into some upcoming work that the city of Eugene has planned. So this year, we really want to start work on an electric vehicle infrastructure plan. We have an electric vehicle strategy that has some action items and policy level like statements about what we want to do, but we don't really have a plan that identifies, you know, in the medium to long range, where do we eventually envision having public chargers? And a planning process like this could be really helpful. We intend to have it include community engagement and data analysis to help us identify sites that could potentially be good charging locations. And then we would have a consulting firm help us vet the site details associated with that, look at the electrical infrastructure that's supporting those sites, you know, have a certain level of review about, you know, the engineering and design of those sites, and then have them produce cost estimates, because charging station projects, the cost of them can vary quite dramatically depending on site variables like, does a transformer upgrade need to be performed to put in the charging station, or do you need a building panel upgrade? So this study would really be intended to get into those kind of nitty-gritty site details. And then the plan that results out of this process would be very helpful for us as we pursue future grant opportunities, because we know that plans like this are really effective for demonstrating what the federal government calls project readiness. So just demonstrating that we've done our homework, we know what this is going to cost, and we're ready to deliver the project that we're asking them to fund. One of the questions I was provided was, how is multifamily access being factored in all of our plans? And I've kind of touched on some pieces of multifamily housing. We talked about it a little bit in the building code slide. Also, you know, on the last slide there, the electric vehicle infrastructure plan is certainly something that would factor in where multifamily housing exists to help, you know, us identify potential sites. In addition to that, I want to go back to this small scale electric car share pilot program that I referenced briefly. Right now, it's quite small, and a couple of the locations are on pause as EWEB goes out to do an RFP to see if there's possibly a vendor out there who could do this at a more affordable rate. But we do have this program active. One of the sites that we have done this at in recent years is a affordable housing development on River Road called Iris Place, and it's done quite well there. You know, the hope is that we'll be able to expand the program to additional sites. EWEB really likes the idea of doing more multifamily complexes, particularly affordable housing complexes, because this type of shared mobility service is really helpful for folks. You know, at multifamily housing at affordable housing complexes, you know, these are folks who may not otherwise be able to afford an electric mobility option. In some cases, they're struggling to afford the cost of owning just any vehicle at all. You know, gas, you know, can sometimes be quite expensive. So this is a service that is really great for expanding access to electric mobility for folks. And then I also got a question about whether anything is planned to go to council. Nothing EV related on my radar, but I will just quickly call out that there are other transportation items that we are anticipating going to council this year, including updating our transportation system development charge list, and also going to council with the complete streets design standards that we've developed. It's kind of, think like kind of standard treatments that would help improve walkability and bikeability on a number of streets in Eugene. So I know I covered a lot really quickly. I was trying to like get through all of the questions I had been provided beforehand. And I think now we have time for more questions or conversation. So I'll just stop talking and let you all talk.
Questions?
Are the tax rebates and whatnot available to used EV purchases?
Not all of them, not all of them. I believe the state rebate program was offering a reduced rebate for used vehicle purchases at one point in time. I'm not sure if when it comes back in the spring, if they're going to make any changes to the structure of the program. But at one point in time, the state rebate was applicable to used vehicles.
Just to tag along on that, if the state program does come back, is the state program and the federal program, can they be both used at the same?
You can take advantage of both. Yeah, the one caveat is the federal is a tax credit, so you have to go whenever you're filing your taxes, and you get your return, that's the interval when you would really see the benefit.
Do you have to purchase vehicles from a dealership in order to access, for used or new, or can it be accessed through person-to-person sales of an EV?
That is a good question. I think that dealerships would need to report certain information to make the transaction traceable for them. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think one person selling to another person would be applicable.
Just a question about the data count. You said something like 4,500 vehicles. Is that include, plug-in hybrids, or are those all electric?
That does include plug-in hybrids. Yeah,
Does?
it does.
And these tax credits are all about.
I was just asking about the number for Canada and how many are currently. There's only 4,500.
It does represent a lot of growth, though.
Kevin?
Is there any, I got a couple questions, kind of one related to what Dennis just asked, but is there any data about, for Eugene, what the median income of an EV owner is?
I don't have the ability to
Right.
access that.
And I could not find it. I mean, the ODOT website, if you guys haven't visited it, is there's so much data there. It's pretty interesting, but there's also things that are missing. I was having a hard time finding out how many EVs in Eugene, but you could easily find out how many EVs in Lane County.
Yeah.
And then they give you an estimate of okay, so it's, I forget, I wrote it down, but now I don't remember where I wrote it down. That's how that goes. 10 EVs per 1,000 people in Lane County.
Yeah, so
From that data, but then that doesn't transfer very well to, okay, if we have 170,000 people in Eugene, that doesn't, then it would imply we have 70,000 EVs, but we don't, right? We have considerably less than that.
yeah, I haven't performed that exact calculation for Eugene, but I agree. It frustrates me too that the data dashboard for the state, it has it all shown at the county level. If you
Yeah.
scroll down, you can download the underlying Excel data and I just know how to look through and
I saw that and that's when I stopped. I cut myself off at that point with the
He gets
with
paid
the
to do it.
the spreadsheet. But it is really cool if you guys haven't seen it, to check it out, because there's a lot there. And I tried you can do a lasso around greater Eugene area, and that gives you a sort of a similar number to what you were referencing. But yeah, no income, because I always wonder about that when I look at the incentives. Who actually is getting the incentives?
yeah, that's
I
an
mean,
interesting question.
How many incentives are collected or used would be an interesting data point. Did you have a?
On that one, I don't. I actually wanted to circle back on Mitra's question. The other thing, I don't know if you mentioned this, but another provision that was added to the IRA tax code was getting a rebate for used EV purchasing.
I feel like I remember something
You
about that.
get up to $4,000. And for that, you can't, it's not personal private sale. You have to buy it through a dealer. The dealer it's basically point of sale rebate. And the dealer has to be basically registered with the IRS. And they basically take up to $4,000 off the cost. And they then go get the rebates. You kind of get that rebate in person when you buy the car. And then there's similar sort of income restrictions and other restrictions in terms of the age of the car, the price of the car and other things. But that should, as more used cars get on the marketplace, open up potential opportunities for people who might not otherwise be able to buy those vehicles to maybe possibly get into one.
That's great.
Is that,
available starting now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
As of, I think, last year, actually, calendar 2023.
Great.
I have a question, which is, what is the timeline, I'm sorry if I missed it, about the EV infrastructure plan?
So we definitely want to get it started this year. You know, at this interval where we're really at is trying to secure consultant support. So we have talked with eWeb, and we're combining resources with eWeb to afford the study that we're hoping to conduct. So I'm hoping that we're gonna be able to onboard a consultant, maybe late spring, early summer. That's my hope. I don't know exactly how long it's gonna take to complete the planning process. I would expect from the time we start it to the time we finish it, it would be at least probably 9 months. But that's just me estimating at this point.
Does that mean that there are no plans to do anything about infrastructure between now and whenever that study is done?
That's not necessarily true. We don't have to wait. But that being said, we don't have a great sustainable funding source to build more charging stations. The ones that we currently own and operate, you know, we visualize the charging stations we have. You've probably seen them in our downtown parking garages mostly. Those have historically been paid for out of the parking revenue from those parking garages. And since the pandemic started, the parking revenue there just took a big hit, and it's just never quite recovered. Even though we're seeing it parked up, that like dip, you know, it's just really affected the revenue of that team that oversees that part of the city. And so I think that right now we're in a position where if we want to put in more charging stations, we really need to be looking for grant funding to do that. Grant funding, I know I mentioned the state rebate program a few in the slide deck, and that is something, the state rebate program for public chargers, that is something that we would be eligible for. But to be honest, like the maximum rebate per port that the state has identified in that program is really small in comparison to the amount of funding it would take to complete a charging station installation. And so we haven't taken advantage of that program, partially because we just don't know where the rest of the funding for the purchasing and construction of the stations would come from.
Yeah, I think I had Dennis and then Alexi and then Devin, or
Mine is just about, are there incentives for ChargePoint and those, you know, pay for charge entities that are, you know, putting them in, but you pay for them,
When you
as
say,
opposed to publicly owned.
you mean, is there a way the city can incentivize those companies putting in chargers?
Right.
Not, so I will say, I don't think I have a clear strategy for how to attract that kind of investment. For level 2 charging, the charging stations that we have in our area, I can think of stations that the city of Eugene owns. I can think of stations that Lane County owns. It's not been a space where we've seen much interest in private sector investment, and there's not really a clear way to make them come. I will say for level 3 charging, DC fast charging, that is a space where more private companies have more interest. I know we don't have tons of DC fast charging in Eugene right now, but I think that is an area where there's more opportunity to potentially lure some private companies and encourage them to invest in our area. Electrify America, the charging station company that put in that charger, that series of fast chargers outside the Fred Meyer on West 11th. We had tried encouraging them to build charging stations in our area a few years ago, and we put in an application for trying to attract them to our area. And at that point in time, I think UWeb and the city, and we got like maybe like 10 or 11 different organizations to like sign supporting letters, like, you know, encouraging them to come to our area and trying to convince them this is an attractive market for them. And at that point in time, they weren't quite ready. We didn't quite make the cut for that round of investment, but they said, we'll consider coming back and looking at you all in future rounds. And they did come back and they built the charging station on West 11th. So I think, you know, progress on that front is slow, but we have had conversations with companies where, you know, we've talked about how adoption rates in Eugene are going and why we think this is a good community for them to come and install chargers. And I think we're going to continue seeing more charging station projects by private companies at the level 3 DC fast charging in the level 3 DC fast charging space.
I know there are level 2s that the feds have some kind of partnership with ChargePoint because there are charge stations at the Veterans Clinic.
Lexi.
So you mentioned there's a priority on getting chargers into multifamily buildings. Makes perfect sense. As it stands now, many, if not most, probably most people that have an electric vehicle charge it in their driveway. But there's also, it seems to me, potentially a real need for people to be able to charge an EV that's parked on the street. Doing that through a cord that runs across the sidewalk is not ideal for obvious reasons. And I'm wondering if the city has looked into sort of templatized expedited permitting or other things that would allow people to put a 240 volt AC charger or something along those lines in the parking strip in front of their property, but that's city land or at least city controlled.
Yeah.
Has that been explored?
No.
So you can not have the driveway?
So the city of Eugene hasn't really had the policy conversation necessary for that. Partially because it is, like you're talking about, it is a tricky space. You know, that is a public parking space. And I think if we permitted somebody putting in a private charger, like next to a public parking space, that creates this expectation that that's their space. And so that feels tricky. One of the many things we're trying to accomplish with the electric vehicle infrastructure plan is, like I said, a lot of it would include data analysis to help identify potential sites. One of the many things I am hoping to factor into that is what areas of town do we have the most, you know, density of single family homes without driveways? And hopefully being able to bundle in the array of recommendations that come out of that planning process, hopefully a plan for more on-street chargers in neighborhoods where we anticipate that becoming an issue as more people adopt electric vehicles.
And with those, you're thinking like publicly funded, publicly operated on-street chargers?
Yeah.
Cited in the right of way.
Yeah, on-street I'm talking about, you know, the planning process would be talking about a combination of looking at city parking lots where we would have future chargers and looking at locations where we might convert on-street parking spaces to charging spaces for public use, yeah.
Mine is maybe more like a personal experience comment rather than an actual question. But so I guess are there, when I look up charging stations and try to find information, so the number that keeps coming up is there's around 200 charging stations, public and private, like in Eugene somewhere. That's kind of, I mean, it's googly, but you know what I mean? Is that
So
true?
so you might have looked at PlugShare. A lot of people look at PlugShare, partially because it is a good resource. It's a good resource if you're trying to find a charger. It's kind of like you can go, you can see, and you can like look at other people's review of the charging stations. And sometimes like there's information on there like, this one's broken, don't come here, or like this one doesn't actually exist. And I've seen the PlugShare like really large number that it says for our area. And to be honest with you, like, I'm not aware of that many public chargers.
That's what I would think.
I think
Yeah.
sometimes, I'm not sure exactly how or why it happens, but I think that there's some type of data management issue related to showing chargers that may in fact be private, or maybe they're like associated with a particular business and they're not actually open to the public.
Right,
And
that's been my experience. I mean, I don't really use the app around Eugene because I had to install a charger in my garage, which was $600 for the charger and $2,500 for installation. Just so you know, I did get a $500 eWeb rebate, but that's the only rebate I qualify for. Out of all the tech, everything, that's the only one I qualify for. So that's why I had these questions, sort of like, I tend to think about like what the goal is. If the goal truly is like cap 2.0 emissions reduction. Like where do we charge? How do we get more people in EVs, regardless of what their income is, right? If we want to reduce emissions, we just want more EVs. So I just always am thinking sort of like, yes, I know there's a finite amount of funds to go around, but where they go, to me, it seems like the people that have the EVs, that makes a lot of sense for those people to be benefiting more, to be adopting EVs, if they are actually the people buying them. And then also my other just sort of observation is like the places I go, you know, where I will drive my EV is like the supermarket. There are no charging stations at Albertsons, at Safeway. I don't care where you shop, if it's MOC or if it's Capella or wherever you're going. I do not find charging stations where like people would like to have a car because they have groceries and they put them in their car. It's like, I'm just not seeing anywhere I go. There's one at the Amtrak station that the city always lists. There's always somebody parked there that isn't in an EV. And there's one. It's just like, okay, well, apparently that's not helpful. So I'm just feeling like there's all this talk about this and where they, but I don't see them in my day. Like I just don't see EV charging stations.
yeah, the city of Eugene itself only owns in the ballpark of 20, which is a lot for a municipality of our size. A lot of them are tucked in our downtown parking garages, so they're a little less, unless you know they're there, you might miss it. It's kind of the sort of thing where if you're not looking for it, you might miss it. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying about like a lot of the shopping centers don't have EV charging stations, and we would like to see that change. It's also a tricky space because, we run into the situation of, well, we can't necessarily pay to put, we run into a tricky space of sometimes shopping center owners want us to pay for them to have a charger, and that's not something we're really well resourced to do, especially because we're struggling to afford, our own chargers, and we're trying to figure out how to secure funding. So it is tricky.
Looks like Erin has a question. Oh, were you next? I'm not.
Sorry, you have to holler because I don't look over at you, sorry.
I just had a question about the fourth EV car share project so you said some of those are on pause. They presented to us, what was it, about a year ago or something? And from what I recalled, it was a pretty affordable price for people, but you said it was on pause because they're seeking more affordable.
So if you want to get it, I know I didn't want to explain it too much because I know this is a really in the weeds answer, but what happened is when the program was launched, Fourth had a grant that funded part of the program, and then eWeb kicked in a little bit of additional funding on top of that. And that has carried us through to this point. Now that Fourth has spent out its grant funding, eWeb needs to increase its financial contribution to the program, which it sounds like they're willing to do. But public entities have like certain funding thresholds for what would warrant us like going through a competitive bid process from like a public contracting law perspective. So they need to go through a process to figure out if there is a vendor that could suit the needs better. And then once that process is carried through, the vendor could still be Fourth if they are the successful proposal, or it could be a different vendor. But the intention is for all of the sites that were included in the original program to continue to be resumed. And then probably, there will also be an expansion of the system to include other affordable housing sites. But exactly how many new sites and exactly where they are is to be determined to the best of my knowledge.
Aaron's turn.
I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit more about how you see opportunities and challenges around getting more DC fast charging into the area? You know, we were talking about on-street parking and different challenges with folks having access to charging. I have to wonder if expanding that part of the charging system might help alleviate some of that. You know, if somebody can go and fill up in an hour rather than having to take, 6, 8 hours on the street. Just wondering what you think about opportunities and challenges there to get more into town.
Sure. So when I think about challenges associated with DC fast charging, cost is the one that comes to mind the most for the city of Eugene. DC fast charging projects, we obviously don't have experience personally building them and managing them. But, from the city's perspective, something like that would very likely be a 6-figure project in comparison to, the level 2 sites can vary a lot, but some of our downtown parking garage level 2 chargers are really more in the ballpark of 15 to 20,000, potentially, depending on how much site work we need to do, to the electrical for the building. So there's a really big cost differential, and that has affected the city's willingness to personally construct and try funding that type of infrastructure just because there's such a big cost differential. So we are in a position where we're trying to rely on public entities to build this type of infrastructure, which leads me to kind of another challenge is, well, we're competing with other markets that they could be investing in. And we're really trying to make the case for why they should be here. But there are many, many other communities with equal, energy and passion trying to make that case. And oftentimes they represent larger populations, and the companies see those larger populations as being a really big lure for them. So that is something that is also a challenge. When I think of opportunities, I do think in some ways the increase in federal funding that we're seeing for EV charging infrastructure is an opportunity, even if we are not personally putting in even if we're not personally putting in the applications. I don't know if you all are familiar, the NEVI program, which is kind of the federal government's, working with the states to build out fast charging on a lot of what they call alternative fuel corridors, which is basically large freeways and large highways, trying to increase the density of fast charging along those types of routes. Right now, I-5 is the only roadway that's identified as an alternative fuel corridor in our immediate area. So I think that in the future, if we're able to get more highways designated as alternative fuel corridors, that's potentially an opportunity to pull in more federal funding for fast charging densification along those routes, if that makes sense. And those decisions about how alternative fuel corridors are designated, that's a federal level decision, but it's informed by the recommendations of the Oregon Transportation Commission. So I think, in the long run, there's potentially some opportunity for us to try getting more routes designated. They do revisit what's classified as an alternative fuel corridor periodically. So I think that is potentially an opportunity that could help.
Sorry.
So in my experience and anecdotally, there are a few things more aggravating when you need to go charge an EV than showing up and being unable to charge, either because there's, as you mentioned, there's someone parked there who's not driving an EV and is simply using it as a parking place, or it's broken. And I just saw recently, that Oregon got a $10 million grant, federal grant to repair EV chargers. And I looked it up and it looks like there are 6 of those within the city of Eugene that are eligible for that repair program. So that part might be improving somewhat, although it's a never-ending challenge because things break. And often EV chargers are just, sometimes they're not working. It's unfortunately not uncommon. And that's not really under the city's control. Maybe you have some, maybe, I don't know how much you're tracking that, so feel free to answer that as possible. And then the other part is the pulling up to a spot that is occupied by someone not charging an EV. And I'm wondering if the city has investigated anything related to that in terms of parking enforcement, like this spot for active EV charging only, and if you're not, you might get a ticket.
Yeah, so on the parking enforcement side of things, for the chargers that we do own, we do have parking enforcement. And they will go and ticket people. Now, they can't always be there, you know, they're kind of rotating. But that is an area where I know they are doing enforcement. So this isn't necessarily specifically related to people who are not charging, like parking in the space. But one of the things that our parking team has done is they've implemented 3-hour time limits for the chargers that we have. And part of the rationale for that was that before they implemented those time limits, some people were they were plugging in at the beginning of their workday and just leaving it there regardless of whether they needed their car there. And that's been one way they've combated that and increased turnover to increase availability for folks who do really need to plug in. And that combined with the enforcement, it feels like we're seeing pretty reasonable compliance, at least that's the opinion of the parking folks I've talked to.
Okay.
So that has been helpful. And then as far as the maintenance goes, I like our chargers, the way that we fund the maintenance or the way that we conduct the maintenance is when we purchase the station, we purchase a 5-year maintenance agreement with the vendor of that station. And then when it comes to the interval where that maintenance agreement is about to expire, we'll renew and we'll kind of like purchase these maintenance contracts with them in that manner. So we, to the best of my knowledge, when an issue happens, we're usually pretty prompt about reporting it to them, and it's typically a manner of how quickly they're able to get a technician out to us to help with it, which can be a little frustrating, but right now that's just kind of how it's being conducted.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have one more question and I think we'll try to wrap it up, Councilor Semple.
Electricity isn't free, so when you have an electric car and you go plug into these places, you don't pay anything.
So
They're like, put your quarters in.
So right now, the chargers that the city of Eugene owns are free for people to plug into. It's kind of been thought of as an amenity for people who are already paying for public parking. And then if they happen to come at a period of time where there isn't paid parking, like on, a weekend day or some type of holiday where we're not having paid parking, then they still have the benefit of charging for free. Our parking team has, when they originally made that decision for the chargers that are in like our downtown area, their rationale was they didn't want to create the perception that they're double charging people. So they're having them pay for the parking and then they're also having them pay for the charging. Now, when we do expand our network of charging stations, it is possible we may need to revisit that. Especially, depending on how much we're able to scale up the amount of public chargers that are available. We need to be thinking about how we fund renewing these maintenance contracts, renewing our extended warranties that we purchase with the vendor. So I think that city staff are going to need to make a policy decision about that at some point. We just haven't gotten to that interval about what that change might be if one is necessary.
One's in a parking lot at a grocery store, then the grocery store has to pay for that electricity. I guess the they get customers who need to charge their cars. Just, it seems like a stumbling block to me, that we want to put in more chargers and give the electricity away for free, which, we give our carbon goals, that's great. But in a parking lot at a grocery store, you might be there an hour. How many chargers are there gonna be? 2 or 3? How do you make that equitable? That's something that's a puzzle to me is, hey, free electricity, can I just bring my batteries in the car, and drive away with electricity? Thank you, it was a very in-depth presentation. I find it very valuable, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Nice presentation.
I can count on parking as a parkade for my plug-in hybrid when the rest of the lot is full. So
Really?
there's an incentive to drive electric. There's some parking spaces that are just for you.
The spaces in the overpark are always, always the overpark.
No, and then when I go to Saturday market, I can score a parking place.
Daniel, I'm gonna head out of that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely,
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Danielle, you were up on engagement on building decarbonization.
While he's getting started, I can, wait, did we lose someone? We lost Karen. Oh, there you are. Just give the lemon bar. Okay, so what my plan is for my presentation is I just want to provide a brief overview of the current engagement that's underway by our team. I'm going to start by sharing the city's climate goals and related data that we have that shows why we're focusing on buildings for this engagement. I'll take a moment to define what we mean by building decarbonization and provide some clarity on recent actions by City Council, including the current motions that are driving this work, and then give a brief overview of our current engagement strategy and timeline. So I'm sure you guys already know this probably, but I'm just gonna share our climate goals again that we have. So the climate recovery ordinance was adopted by City Council in 2014. It establishes a community goal of reducing fossil fuel use by 50% by 2030. This goal is in our city code. And then in 2022, City Council also set a more aspirational goal to decarbonize existing buildings by 2045. We have the CAP 2.0, and that's sort of meant to help us achieve those goals. Many topics, many projects that relate to those topics. And if you're interested in learning more about how progress on CAP 2.0 is going, we will be presenting to City Council in March. So I highly recommend that all of you watch that presentation. I can share the date as it gets closer. But basically from our data, it's pretty clear that our biggest source of emissions locally is transportation. There's a ton of work happening to address that chunk of the pie, but the next biggest chunk is buildings. So residential and commercial buildings, which represent about 30% of our local emissions. And yeah, carbon emissions from buildings occur largely because of the energy systems and equipment within the home or within the buildings that power the activities that take place. So, water heating, space heating, cooking, all of those take a lot of energy and produce a lot of emissions if they're powered using, not using clean electricity. And so reducing carbon emissions from buildings, that's called building decarbonization. And there's many approaches for achieving that. Some of the range of actions that can be taken to decarbonize buildings fit into the 3 categories that you see here. So clean energy, the idea there is to transition away from fossil fuels and power as many building systems as possible with clean renewable electricity sources. that can be solar installations on rooftops or hooking up to a utility to access clean energy like hydro, solar, and wind power. It can also mean using for, commercial or industrial sectors, using lower carbon fuels like something called hydrogen, which many of you are probably aware of. And then using energy more efficiently is another approach. So that's the second bubble. This can include weatherization, improvements like building insulation and air sealing, window upgrades, upgrades to LED lighting, high efficiency equipment. And then electrification. So when equipment needs to be replaced, evaluating if there's an opportunity to upgrade to an electric option. So that's sort of what we mean when we talk about building decarbonization. And to give you a little bit more insight about how the city fits into all of this, there's been a lot of recent actions by City Council to tackle this issue of reducing emissions from buildings. Last January, City Council voted to restrict gas in new residential construction. The intention there was that, new buildings should be built so that they don't rely on fossil fuels. That makes sense, but a court ruling in Berkeley on a very similarly written ordinance confirmed that that ordinance was not going to be possible here. And so City Council rescinded that ordinance. There's currently 3 motions from City Council related to this issue. So basically the first 2 direct staff to engage marginalized communities and business communities to develop a building decarbonization plan. And then the third motion is, well, the last one, direct staff to research what strategies have been adopted in other jurisdictions to reduce gas in new construction. And this is basically just a research project at this point. So we'll be returning in June to City Council to report back on the results of our engagement and the results of our research.
What was the third motion?
Well, I kind
Or
of,
is that 2 and 3?
the first one was engage historically marginalized, the second one was engage the communities, the third one was do the research. So I kind of lumped them together up there. And so, yeah, here's an engagement of our overview. We're basically in the middle of a large engagement process to carry out these motions. Here's a broad timeline of that engagement. Right now, we're in the middle of having focus groups. We'll be putting out a public survey and holding listening sessions, and that would be great if the Sustainability Commission can participate in those 2 activities. And like I said, we'll be presenting our findings to City Council in June. I've listed some of the questions, these are high-level questions that we're trying to address with this engagement, but how might we design and implement programs that reduce costs? How does building decarbonization intersect with housing affordability, workforce development, and public health? How can we ensure the benefits of clean and efficient energy reach those who need the most? And what are the energy needs of businesses and what is their potential for conservation? So yeah, that's about it for me for my presentation. We have a few minutes for questions. I know that was a lot, but and we don't have a ton of time for questions, but probably for 1 or 2.
Simple. I'm thinking that we want to get this going. How are we incentivizing? Just a couple of questions that you may not know, but I've heard for a long time that the federal government was going to give incentives for changing to buying electric stoves. Do you know if there's any updates on that? Because it never seems to have happened. And then long ago, I remember there were programs for weatherization. You come below that, welcome to your house. I don't know if anything like that is still going on. And I think there's mention of incentives for windows. I don't know if you have to have electric heat to get that. So you may not have that information now, but that's something that I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, I'm not aware of a federal program for electric stoves, but there's incentives. Are you?
And it's part of the IRA rebates, the
For electric
induction.
stoves? Oh, okay,
rebates
yeah,
specifically.
That makes sense.
And it's income limited, so low to moderate income folks can get some IRA rebates that can be for many different things. One of them is induction ranges.
How would I find out about that?
You have information on our website that I can forward you to.
Us.
So on this, for a lot of this,
QR
I
code.
talked about this briefly between calls last month, but a lot of the benefits under the IRA is going to be seen through the tax code. So a lot of the things that are going to be available as rebates, as incentives are through the tax code. And so it's going to be through that rather than rebates or grants or things like that. But we continue to build it, but we do have some information on the website that's just, trying to let people know about some of that. A lot of these programs continue to be developed, the money's rolling out. A lot of this money is really rolling through the states. And so we're sort of tracking how the money is going from the feds to the states to then be available through rebates or through state programs or possibly available to residents directly. And so we continue to track that so that we can sort of better understand what is available and how people can access some of those resources.
Is any of it available now, or is this like?
Yeah,
next
things
year?
through the tax code, you can claim on your tax credit now depending on where you buy. As of anything you might have purchased in 2023 moving forward.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
I have two questions. One is there a focus on increasing from our energy providers, whether they're gas and electric, the percentage that is not coming from carbon, fossil fuels?
Wait, what's the question?
Is there a lot of effort? So there's the people that consume the energy on the household level in the buildings, but the people that provide the energy, is there a lot of incentives or to get them to switch over to cleaner energy that source the buildings?
I mean, like UWeb and.
Yeah, and Northwest Central, yeah. I mean, I know UWeb's, what, is it 93%?
Yeah, they're pretty darn clean.
But like, what about Northwest Natural? Is it?
There are things, there are investments in hydrogen at the federal level. There's a lot of tax credits there. So yes, there are things there that I think, from what I understand, Northwest Natural is looking at, other gas companies are looking at as a way to try to decarbonize some of their supply as well. It's not, so Iowa was really designed explicitly to focus on low and moderate income homeowners and residents, so that the bulk of the incentives coming through that are focused on sort of that segment of the population. But there are some things available either in the bipartisan bill or in the Inflation Reduction Act focused on some of the more upstream things in terms of the grid, in terms of other fuel supplies. And I know that a lot of these companies are looking at that because of policy actions at state level, because of things that are going at the federal level. So yes, I think there is a focus on that as well, trying to figure out whether it's through things at the state on renewable natural gas or through hydrogen, but trying to figure out ways in which they're decarbonizing their fuel supply as well.
And this is another kind of time, thank you for that, a timely, so in a disaster like we all just experienced recently, if you're 100% reliant on electricity and that goes out, which a lot of us did lose it, is there a vision of how to face situations like that, which we might be seeing more consistently for homeowners, people living in buildings?
I mean, that's part of what, I think our engagement isn't necessarily meant to like come up with the answers, but it's meant to really understand what the challenges and opportunities that we face. And we're hearing that a lot already, like, what about the reliability of the electric grid in the face of these ice storms or other natural disasters, and with those likely going to be more prevalent, so I think our goal with this engagement is to capture those stories, and that's a big. We've heard that a lot.
The concept of energy resilience has already been coming up quite a bit.
I was gonna ask something similar to Mitra, was like, after the storm, like, did you get like people a little bit more information about that? Cause I personally know some people that did end up, they wouldn't have had heat, elderly people for several, 6-7 days if they didn't have natural gas. And that was, anecdotally, but it happened. So I'm not gonna go into that, because you kind of already answered that, but it was another point. But also, I'm really interested in more information, more widely spread, and maybe with the Education Outreach Committee as well, of the weatherization options being communicated more, like getting the inspections. And we've talked about this privately a little bit, but like inspections for people under a certain income threshold, but inspections for everybody, again, I'm kind of gonna beat a dead horse here. It's like, does it really matter how much money you have? Like, you need to know how to reduce your emissions, because we all live here, you know, it's everybody. So, and especially when I look at your graph and some of your materials about single unit, like how much per square foot, like the bigger house you have, the more energy you're using and the likelihood that you're leaking more, you know, you're not being energy efficient. So I would love to have my house assessed and have that information readily available. I don't find it quickly, like, you know, through websites or whatever it is, like, I know we've just talked about it, but like, how can we get that information out? Cause that's super important, aspect.
So what Devin's talking about is a home energy score. It's something that you can, if you're income qualified or if you're renting, you can get one for free through the U of O / U partnership. They can provide you a home energy score, and it's basically an energy audit of your home, how energy is being used, and what some intervention points might be that could help improve the energy performance of your home and potentially like save you on energy bills and
Link that to incentives. I mean, like, oh, and here's, by the way, here's the, you know, what Counselor Sumble is talking about that used to be, which is like, oh, you can, you know, oh, if you like get this, you can have all your windows replaced. I know my mom did that at one point. And it was amazing. She got them all for free. It was crazy. Yeah, in her little leaky old home. But that, and then like, okay, so if you're not income qualified, potentially you could also be the people with the biggest house generating the most, you know, so how do you get those people on board to get their house scored and do something about it?
yeah. I mean, isn't it like 100, isn't there a tax credit you can get for doing a home energy audit right now?
Two things to that. One, yes, I think there's a policy discussion to figure out how this plays in kind of the broader decarbonization conversation on raising awareness, making people aware of what their home scores at, what the opportunities are. I think in addition to the voluntary program that is done through the University of Oregon, anybody can call up an assessor and have a home energy score done for their home. There is a cost associated with it, but there is a $150 tax credit that you can actually, and I don't think it's actually income restrained. I think anybody who can do it, and you can basically recoup 80 or 90% of the cost of that as basically a rebate when you do your taxes.
Yeah,
Sorry?
where does this happen? Like, how do you find that out? I mean, not you,
Fair
I
point.
mean, me.
It's through the tax code. It's basically through Treasury.
No, but I mean, how do you get
Like, I don't know.
the audit done if you are gonna pay for it yourself? Is that through eWeb?
No, it's
Private company.
yeah, I mean, through private companies. We have information on this on our website. We probably need to do a better job of advertising it. There are firms in Salem and in Bend who are probably the most local, who will come here and do an audit for you. We've had in the last couple of months, 36 people who called us at the office.
People.
Are there?
I
Okay.
had it done for
Oh,
Eugene.
okay. I might follow up with you on that because we've been working on the Earth Advantage number. Okay.
Would you share that via email?
Probably not.
That'd be great.
Oh,
I think Bend, because Bend now has a point of sale requirement of having a home energy score, similar to Portland and Milwaukee. They had a bunch of people that set up shop in Bend to actually serve that marketplace. And so a lot of those folks, I'm glad to hear that there are folks in Eugene now, serve the Eugene market as well.
Are there any, does Eugene have any designs on that kind of idea?
I think part of what we're going to be doing through engagement is to kind of test that and better understand. I think one of the challenges we face here is one, number of rental properties that we have. And basically the home energy score policy that the Department of Energy has not historically accommodated rental properties through their methodology. That's changing. They're adopting and updating some of those rules. Multi-unit housing also historically hasn't been part of this. And so trying to focus on those segments as well and how we can bring that information for these other housing types is part of what we're looking at.
Great, thank you.
Dennis.
Yeah, just, a follow-up on the sense of awareness, and I was very glad to see, scheduled engagement with, commercial entities and food and beverage, for example. And I'm hoping it creates opportunities for dialogue, both they're saying what they need and becoming aware of other kinds of options. And I'll just share a quick anecdote. I'll share that I have a little studio that I rent, and it's a tiny house size space, and there's an induction cooktop, and we've been renting to a chef. And he said, I don't think the cooktop's working. And I said, well, what do you mean it's not working? She has, the light goes on, but it doesn't get warm. He's a chef. He didn't know how induction cooking works. You know, that you have to put the pan on it and the pan gets hot, but the induction cooktop will never get hot. So that was just to me one example of a professional chef who had no knowledge of what induction cooking was all about. You know, and that key piece, I mean, when you bring up that word about awareness, there's so much of that. I mean, part of what if we go on the road and talk about the commission, one of the main things we can accomplish is get people the website.
Or have a leave behind that people can take or code
Yeah.
at the table that they are then having information at their disposal for this. Yes.
I mean, that one just really struck me, I kind of, you're a chef. You should know this.
Yeah.
Well, now he does.
Now we.
And I will say that both ETO and eWeb, when you contact them, if you know the step to actually go contact them about efficiency, whether it's weatherization or other things, they do at least raise awareness of, oh, hey, there's also this rebate from the state, and oh, hey, you may be eligible for this tax credit. They don't claim to be tax attorneys, but they at least raise awareness as well. So if you're entering through that channel, you also get information through there. But I think the city definitely could be more forward-thinking in terms of how we're raising awareness about these programs.
Right, and one of the best sources we've found are vendors, people who are selling a product. I mean, the solar vendor I'm working with knows what incentives are eligible.
So, okay, we got a couple other things. So I just wanted to ask, so you're reporting back to council in June?
June or July,
Yeah,
but
June.
yes,
I
sometime.
assume that the commission will be able to sort of tune in, and
Definitely.
hear what all that is, and we'll be participating in sometime in the spring in the other pieces.
There's gonna be an online survey and then there's gonna be some listening sessions that you can join. We don't, I mean, let's keep these last questions short because we're already 10 minutes
Oh,
behind and
okay.
our meeting is already going really late.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. All right, thanks for keeping an eye on the time. I was a minute ago and then I forgot. Anything else urgent for this item? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Funding request from Mecca. Danielle, who's got the lead on this? Okay.
So one of my new jobs is the community engagement coordinator for Mecca. And Laura and I, combination effort between 350 Eugene and Mecca. We were interested in producing a youth sustainable art event in honor of Earth Day. So Mecca has been doing an event called Object Afterlife. Those of you, does everybody know what Mecca is? Do I have to? Okay, go into that. Okay. So we do a event where we give artists waste materials, art materials, and they are challenged to create art with them. And it's actually for all ages, but typically engaged by adults. And years ago, when I worked for St. Vincent de Paul, we did one called Metamorphose Art Challenge in collaboration with Mecca, where we took basically painted canvases that were headed to the waste stream because they weren't finished or discarded or something messed up or whatever, and gave them to kids to upcycle into their own pieces. And then, do you want to talk about the 350?
Yeah, for a couple of years before the pandemic, a project of 350 Eugene called 350 Families that I was part of. We did an Earth Day art show with youth, anyone under 18 basically in Lane County. And we had it at the library and it wasn't reused art, it was just on like paper, but it was about environmental topics. And it was really, lots of kids did it and it was really sweet. And they came and like, we displayed their art. And so I had reserved a display at the library already, but then the kind of support with that sort of fell through. But then found out that Mecca was doing a really similar concept. And so we decided to kind of come together and do a hybrid team up. Yeah. So that's what.
Cool.
So yeah, we've created this vision of this event where we have actually a live call to youth artists out right now that we launched yesterday. And we're diverting the materials right now to give out to them at the end of this month. And then they would take them and they'd get $10 in Mecca money, so they'd get some free art supplies to use to transform their pieces. The topic is actually the topic of Earth Day this year, which is planet versus plastics. So it's fun to just give people a topic if they want to use. And then they would transform it, bring it back to us at the beginning of April, and we would put it on display at the library and at Mecca, and we'd have an art opening with refreshments. And then there's a possible collaboration being brewed with the Fifth Street Market, where one of the big pieces of this is to incentivize engagement with youth by giving away prizes. And we're talking about things like memberships to elevation and bounce gymnastics, so the trampoline park or the swim park, or movies and bowling alleys, activities, things that you and kids would find fun and entertaining. But that costs money, so we're looking for funding to incentivize participation of youth for this event.
I could add one more. And
Yes.
also, we want the, like the reception to be really, kind of fancy and like special. So we want to cater it through the LCC and it's a partnership. I'm blanking on who it is. I think you put it in the application. But anyway, we want to cater it. So that's what the money would go to is the food for the event. That would be a local.
Questions? Shall we entertain a motion to approve?
One question, we have not seen any other applications so far. Can you remind me what our budget is? We're working
I
on?
mean, our balance.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
5,000, this is 1.55.
We've talked about, we did a little bit, but we've talked about when we do engagement to include something about the green fund, so people even know it exists, right? But so far, we don't have a lot of action that way. Shall anybody want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the request.
All right, all in favor?
We're gonna abstain.
Oh,
Or I would.
I think you have to.
And Aaron and myself. Any opposed? No, I don't think so. All right, excellent. Thank you. Sounds fun.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Good work.
Yeah, please share with any kiddos that this type of thing, as we have both experienced, has been really exciting. I mean, just an open call for kids to show their art, period, but having a positive action that they can take with respect to sustainability is really. Thank you so much.
So how are we advertising? Remind me.
Well,
On the
currently it's on a Facebook called.
She might be asking about.
You think I was talking about the green flags.
That's kind of a whole nother item, but really it's, there is something on that website about it, but that's about it.
Well, is that something that we can do some outreach on?
Yeah.
I don't know.
As I said,
It just sits there.
We should put it.
No, we're going to,
Yeah.
that's been discussed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Go education committee.
Trying.
A lot in your way.
The solution to everything. Education and outreach committee.
Well, that's something, I'll email that to Kelly Bell at the Master Recyclers. Is there a link for it on our website?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to increase awareness about it, just share with nonprofits that you know about.
Right. Word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Committee updates. We have an action item. We probably should start with that. Food Waste Prevention Committee.
This one, do you want me to pull it up while you talk about it?
Yeah, that would be great. So, we on the Food Waste Prevention Committee have,
Let go.
we've identified are vermin, including fruit flies, rats, that the gross factor, odor, it's not available, so maybe they're not aware that it's available, or for some reason it's not. The cost of the hauler, by adding yard debris collection, not having a container. Some people just think that they have to purchase an actual like compost bin to use. And like next to their sink, they're unsure what's compostable. Challenges transporting it, like taking it out to the bin, not having support from their families or people they live with, don't feel it's necessary, and other. We have, I think, another meeting scheduled where we can kind of tweak this if you all have information that you would want to see changed. But just basically, I'm looking for feedback and questions. We are looking for feedback and questions on this.
And Counselor.
This looks great, and I signed up to help at the home show, so if anybody wants to do that at the Lane County Waste Management booth, which is the master recyclers. And they told me that, I talked to Kelly.
Oh, so you signed up through Lane County Waste
Yeah,
Management?
through Master Recyclers, cause I get the newsletter, and I mean, if you're interested in that, I can hook you up, but, anyway. And then she told me, cause we had a long discussion about this, that, the county just came into some money for composting. And I talked about the concept of maybe buying bins and giving them away, county compost, so anyways.
Oh, yeah.
You talk to Kelly, don't you?
I do.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Somebody I know likes that idea.
Just to clarify, so we had originally talked in our meeting about having to staff this table. Well, we don't have to. So if you want to, like, that's great if you're signing up through Master Recyclers, but I think that's wonderful that they're willing to use this resource regardless of our availability to staff it.
Great. Counselor Semple.
I just want to say thank you. I think that's a great idea. One of my things is how do we get out to the public with these things and make them accessible? So thank you. That's fantastic. So many people do go to the home show, and that's it. So
We're really excited about, thank you. And we're really excited about this because it's just an action. And we hope to include this at maybe tabling events again in the future in some iteration. Additionally to this, we have received a slide that was prepared by the city of Eugene that we can include in our slide deck about the topic of food waste. And there's bin decals that the Lane County Waste Management has available, which is another really low hanging fruit item that it really clarifies any confusion around what's goes in the yard waste bin, what they can take, what they can't take, and communicates out to people walking by that this is something that is happening and is possible. So that, those are two things, and they'll both be, those will be available at the home show too. So very excited. Thank you.
Great.
Oh, we have to vote.
What?
Maybe?
And I just had a quick thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. If you have just like little suggestions, we just email you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, we can tweak it for sure.
Great.
Question, is Lane County gonna get the results or like data back to the commission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they said they just give it back to us. And then we can include it in our report that we provide to the city.
Anything else? Counselor Semple.
just real quick, is it gonna say the Sustainability Commission is part of it, or is it just gonna be Lane County?
We can certainly say that. Yeah, I think they wouldn't mind at all.
I think that would be really great,
Nice.
because
Yeah.
people aren't even aware that we exist.
Okay.
And so to give
City
us some
logo on
name
it.
recognition, I think that, and credit, so I think we should do that.
We could just give the flyer that's already been developed that has like, what's the commission, information about the green fund,
Yeah.
how to give public comment, like, we already have a flyer like that.
Okay, great. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think these are the types of things, with, like, what form are we gonna hand this over to them? And how is it gonna be gathered and how they'll get it back to us?
Okay, are we,
I'm ready to make a motion that commission supports utilization of such a survey, empowering the committee to make minor adjustments as they deem appropriate. It would be identified as coming from the commission to be distributed in a variety of venues.
third and fourth. All in favor?
Good motion, Deborah.
Yeah, okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
I heard that.
All right,
Good motion.
moving on, commissioner updates, commissioner and staff updates from council.
I just wanted to note that the Building Decarbonization Committee did meet today.
Under committee.
Thank you for rescheduling, so for the chaos that caused for folks if it did. We had to push it off a week and then move it by an hour. But we have two guests. We had Faith Graham from Elevate Energy, their nonprofit, works nationally. And we had Ryan Sheehy from Fleet Development, who's out in Enterprise, Eastern Oregon. The focus was the split incentive. So when a landlord controls the purchasing decisions about, say, the rental home, and the tenant pays the utility costs. How do we bridge that gap to try to get more rental properties?
Very interesting discussion.
So I had a 1 hour discussion. It was just today, so we don't have aggregated notes. If anyone else took notes, please send them to me. I'll aggregate. But if you didn't take notes and you have thoughts, that would be great.
Sure. I inadvertently talked to a friend of mine last week who works for the US Water Alliance and pertaining to decarbonization and to this concept of thinking outside the box on energy is that he is working with cities around the country on extracting heat from sewers. I don't know if you know anything, have you heard anything about that? And then they're also working on getting energy from air too as well. So it was fascinating. He's like been actively working and visiting large cities. And Aaron, he's meeting Josh Proudfoot at a conference in Lake BC here pretty soon. So there's a lot of stuff on the horizon that isn't in our purview right this second, but I was really excited to hear about that. And you already knew it.
I've never heard of it. It's a pretty neat emerging solution.
Okay, very good. So now we're moving on from committee updates to commissioner and staff updates and council updates, starting with council.
Don't have a lot for you this month. Next thing we're doing about sustainability is on the 13th, as has already been mentioned, implementation progress on CAP 2.0. Today we talked about the Santa Clara River Road Neighborhood Plan, which has been quite a long time in the making due to the pandemic. And during that time, some of the state rules have changed. So like what's happening with that, there's a public hearing with the county commissioners next month. Today we heard about how great the library is doing, which is awesome. The best thing in town is the library. So that was really great news. And today we deliberated about putting out a bond for the M Stadium, which has been controversial and a lot of moving parts or not moving parts because we said to the county, we would consider putting it forward if they answered some questions, which they have not given us answers to or made the decisions so they could answer the questions. Today was the deadline to refer something to the ballot. So 7-1, we voted to do that with the provision that we will come back to another work session because it has to be given to the county at a later date. And then if we haven't gotten the information, and we will also know whether or not the state has put forth some more money, so we can take that back if we don't want it to go on the ballot. A lot of feelings both ways. Hesitate to put an ask out there for money when we have so many budgetary needs. But we also really felt that the community should decide about this. So that's where it is right now. We're really going for it. All right, so thanks for your work.
what from staff. We've got to talk about getting questions for next month.
Do you have questions?
I have a different update, but what I.
Oh, okay, well, my update is I just wanted, y'all to generate questions for next month's meeting topic. That seemed really helpful to have questions ahead of time for Logan. It allowed the presentation to be much more geared towards what you guys wanted to hear, so. If we can generate questions right now, that would be great. So next month's topic is the Recycling Modernization Act. New state ruling that's gonna impact the way we recycle. And so that's all I'm gonna say about it now, because it's a big, complicated thing. But
Presenting.
Deborah, that's great.
When I can formulate this better, but one thing that I mean, it is a big giant thing. And Karen, I think, is our resident expert. More than anyone else, maybe, Karen.
Work in progress.
But I'd like to hear the portions that affect producers. And how does it, if the producers are out of state, maybe this is a naive question, I just don't even know how to unpack the RMA. Like, in-state producers, out-of-state producers, how does that work? I mean, I know that's a sort of a obtuse, more of an idea than a question, like, but that's kind of my big curiosity.
One place to look is Vancouver, British Columbia implemented this. So they've been kind of a test model for it for a really long. They developed the whole.
Oh, look, but I just want to better understand.
I want to know about its impact and ties to any climate plans that we have, or climate action, or whatever climate impacts. If that's part of it, and
Like to the climate action plan? Or
yeah, I mean, does the RMA, does it contain a reporting requirement, or is there an evaluation or something as they're monitoring, et cetera? And then, I also want to know about, it's called the Recycling Modernization Act. So does that extend to food or organics?
Aaron's got his hand up.
Oh, hello, Aaron.
I'd like to hear about how the money flows as the money's collected and the fees, how it flows back to communities and what kinds of projects it can be used for and by whom.
I have an update that I meant to give, and so I'm gonna wait until
Okay,
we
hang on a
finish this
second.
section.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so is that good for now on the Recycling Modernization Act?
More.
Did you also want to entertain questions for urban growth strategies?
That one, I don't think we need to come up with questions. That's gonna be a pretty broad, high level overview, kind of similar to what I did, like a shorter presentation of the engagement. That's upcoming.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like to cover under updates? Okay.
And if we have any questions,
Yeah, send
email
them to
them.
me.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
think of something that you're not thinking.
I got one, how is it gonna impact collection,
Okay.
like our curbside?
Yeah. Okay, Lexi, what did you have?
All right, I have an update related to the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the city, which is the University of Oregon steam plant.
Yeah.
The task force made their recommendation to the UO president, who recommends in turn to the board of trustees who make the decision. The task force recommended it's sort of the upfront cheapest option that is not do nothing. It's an 8 megawatt, which is relatively small for the size of what they're talking about, electric boiler to keep the steam system and put in a boiler that would cover about half of their heating load, roughly. I think it would cut their greenhouse gas emissions by 45%, so not dramatic. They were concerned about the cost and the disruption related to switching from a steam distribution system to a hot water distribution system. And that's a legitimate concern. It's expensive and difficult to dig all the stuff up and change the equipment to go from steam to hot water. So the current status of that is they've recommended this relatively small and relatively inefficient, but electric solution, or partly electric solution.
Partly electric, right?
Electric with the current gas burning system as a backup to cover the other. As a sort of a stopgap thing, basically. You know, they say we could do this in a couple years, turn around, and then I think the theory or the hope is that maybe there will be something that comes around that can generate steam in a more efficient, all-electric fashion down the road. There might be, but it might be a minute. So this may be one of those temporary solutions that looks awfully permanent. You know, the commission never had any power about this at any point. All we could ever do is send a letter to council advising council of this, which we did. And council also doesn't particularly have the power because it's the university board. So just FYI that the ball is rolling. The president, UO president has the power to recommend something other than what the task force recommends, but I think it's probably unlikely. And so that's where that sits.
What's the option number on that one?
That was 2B.
2B, yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to write it down.
And that was a recommendation that came out February 5th. I can find links and such.
So it goes.
Given that it's the quicker thing, and in the recommendation memo, they say, we know it's the quicker thing, this leaves room for something else in the future, there may be cause to revisit this in several years down the line, and assuming they go ahead with this as is, there may be cause to revisit.
So one thing I don't understand, just something we were saying, so this option to be, it will still have gas. So will the gas, when you said backup, but then you said it'll do half the system, so is it gonna be, it's gonna be running gas?
They're gonna keep the existing gas boilers and reduce their usage by about 50% by also installing an steam electrode chiller that would take about half the load.
Okay, so then, Devin and I wanted to talk more about the meetings with counselors. So we really do want to encourage everybody to be establishing connections with your counselor or a counselor. And we've talked about that a few times, and we thought that perhaps we could get involved to foster that, because some people may or may not have already a connection with a particular counselor. You real comfortable with that whole idea? So we talked about that we would make initial outreach to the counselors and just to say, hey, we're gonna be doing this. You wanna go ahead?
Yeah,
Is
sure.
that right?
I know, you don't need to talk anymore.
Yeah, I'm gonna start coughing again.
So I put together, did you get that list I sent you yesterday?
I'm sorry, I did.
You got the email though, didn't you? Maybe not. I'll ask you about it. But anyway, so I put together it's super simple, but it's just a list of like the counselors who falls in what, and also the counselor contact information, just to have it all in one table, which didn't exist apparently. So when I finished Jan yesterday and she and I met, and talked about how, like what she said is like, we want to set it up, but we thought maybe it would be, you know, and maybe with Danielle's help as well, to sort of try to first facilitate, you know, a meeting with a group of counselors. Like we'll split the list and reach out to different ones and say, hey, we'd like to meet. this is part of our, in our work plan, or not work plan.
Working agreement.
Working agreements. And see if I can get some dates from specific ones and then reach out to you guys and say, oh, you know, this counselor is available to me at these times or these days, are you? And we could try to facilitate commissioner meetings with counselors and just sort of get that ball really rolling. Rather than just like leave it up to you guys in your spare time to try to sort it all out and make that happen. And then you could have, I would encourage all commissioners, since it is in the working agreements, to accept those invitations. However, I mean, Jan and I are also available to go ahead and meet with counselors on an individual basis, even if commissioners aren't available to do that.
I
So,
just want to say thank you for helping get the ball rolling so I can get a conversation with Alan Zelenka. It's overdue. I haven't talked to him.
right, I think we can,
And to do it in a context of outreach from the commission
right,
feels good to me.
good.
I'm not just the guy up the road, I'm the guy up the road and I'm here as a commissioner.
Exactly, and I mean, again, you know, Jan and I we meet monthly
Thank you.
with Matt Keating. I mean, he likes to meet monthly, so we do.
And it
So it's
doesn't
just-
have to be that much, but
No, it does,
Yeah.
absolutely does not, but I mean, that's the kind of, like, we're getting a lot of ear time about what the Sustainability Commission is up to with the questions, and we give him like a committee reports essentially, like, so he knows kind of what's happening, and he provides information as well. So that's been very positive.
so you will be hearing more about that. Any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I just had a question. I'm just a at-large committee or member, so I don't have a counselor. What do you envision happening in these meetings? Like, is there an agenda? Are there talking points and just updates? Is that?
Well, I think one of the first things is like, hey, we're the Sustainability Commission. This is what we do, and we have an advisory role via ordinance.
Okay.
Right, I think starting there, because I do feel that there is maybe some disconnect among or certain counselors or of like, what is our role? And I think that's a great starting point. And then we could also give like committee, like, this is what we're working on. It doesn't have to be, it's meant to be sort of casual in a way, like, and like get to know a counselor. And so to your other point, at large, I mean, is there a counselor you've always been dying to get to know? Like, you can choose like somebody, I mean, if you're comfortable with, or you could even join, if you wanted, join me and Jan sometime to meet with Matt Keating, and if that would be.
Yeah, I'd join with anyone. I'm open.
Yeah, because the at-large commissioners will maybe double up with the person who's appointed by, somebody in the board, and that could make the meeting a little more fun and interesting for everybody. They have been fairly casual. I gotten to where we just are now, before we go to meet with Matt, we talk first about what are our agenda items so that we have a little idea of what we're gonna go to if conversation veers way off but it's pretty informal, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna, whatever ward you live in, if that appeals to you, you could meet with your ward counselor, right?
I live in the county now.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Well, you're just gonna have to think about it.
actually, I don't know if that means I have to drop off the.
I don't think you have to live in the community, unfortunately enough.
It's a Eugene address.
I think because when we get the applications, it says what ward, and sometimes it will say
Okay.
out of the city.
I usually meet with my.
Time, I think someone needs to motion to extend the meeting by 5 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right,
I usually meet with my personal counselor, even though it's not the one appointing me, because the one appointing me doesn't meet with, anyway, there's just FYI, and I don't need to be on the group things. I already have the relationship, so I could just,
okay.
just to save everybody some time.
Yeah, do that, let us know.
I'm with Emily. So same
You
thing,
can
but
leave us off the
but
list.
I was- I was
Put it
wondering-
on our to-do list.
I wonder if there's any counselors who don't have somebody appointed here, and that might be an opportunity for anybody.
Yes.
Okay,
There's one at the
There's
current moment.
Huh?
There's one at the current, right.
In spite of lots of urgent
And, yeah,
and saying, you know, you could have someone from the gas company.
care
if you
if it-
want
You'll get a Mitra.
different people. so.
Yeah.
okay, anybody else, anything else? See, we
Lexi,
didn't
you have
get
your thing up.
Oh.
You didn't have to extend it.
Aaron, anything else? Okay. Think that's a wrap.
Great meeting.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was
Very
great.
much. Really good meeting.
Good job. You forged through, you powered through.
Thanks for